Hello, happy Monday to you. Welcome to Screen Junkies Universe. We're actually in real time. It's Saturday night at Comic-Con. We're tired and we're seeing what it takes to get Groot happy. I told you he said something.
Copyright.
It hasn't done that in an hour.
You know what? They didn't believe
Heads up
me.
before we do a man spread cam on me next time, please.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
No warning on that.
Close a little. Very shy.
We're going to be talking about the winners and the losers of Comic-Con. I'm going to go ahead and let you guess which we are at this point in the day.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Sleepy champions and winners.
Oh.
He's murdering a predator.
That's on brand for Groot, though.
Yeah.
He's pretty good at taking out mercenaries.
I want this to be in the Shane Black movie.
I would like to know what Chewie thinks of Groot. Or I would not like to know what Chewie...
That looks so disapproving.
I feel like he's almost hurt. Oh my God. I feel like he's hurt that he's been replaced.
This is basically like having Dan and Roxy on other side of the table.
The sad thing about this is that we actually have some real things to show you today. We have Paul Bettany here. Well, not with us, but we had a previous interview with Paul Bettany. We have an interview with legendary producer Gale and Hurd. But for now, we'll just focus on Chewie and Groot. It was a big Comic-Con in certain respects, in the respect of Monsters, which to me was the winner of the con. That Godzilla trailer was the thing that got me the very most excited. What about you guys?
I think my winner for the con, or at least the thing that I was most impressed with, was the Shazam trailer. Because I said it on Twitter, I'll say it again, I'm eating crow. I said that suit looked really mighty stupid when I saw it in those photos earlier, and then when I saw how it played out, this looks like a really fun movie and a nice breather for DC. The DC, they called it World of DC.
They've now changed it to World of DC.
With me.
I gave you
DC.
And a world of dark and gritty Batman.
I gave them the perfect name the other day with the multiverse.
Yeah.
And they didn't even listen.
Yeah.
No, it's like they don't even watch our show anymore. It's so frustrating.
And you know what, Jeff Johns? That hurts just a little bit. Aquaman, that trailer, you and I were both fully into the Fishman.
So I have two winners of Comic-Con, and this is one of them. I said it earlier in the weekend. Sometimes I feel like we don't get excited about things in the way that we should anymore. You know, we did a Dark Knight anniversary talk, and we were all very calm, and people were like, "What is wrong with you? It's the Dark Knight. It's a good movie. Would you put some joy back in your lives?" And to sometimes,
I didn't see all that.
Sometimes I worry about it. That's why we don't let you look at the comments, Roth. But sometimes that gets in my head a little bit. And we were sitting and watching the Aquaman trailer, and I got so excited in a way that I don't anymore. I don't know if it's the honest trailer brain or what it is, but I just don't get there as much anymore. And I was so pumped for just water knights riding sharks.
Yes.
And yeah, super excited. So that was definitely one of my two big winners of the convention.
I'm with you on all of the things. Meh responses people had to, well, I think that people had a surprise response to the Titans trailer that was released for the DC streaming service and the frolic, "You Batman," out of Robin.
Yeah, look, I still feel like
Look how sad
he's very upset with Batman. Look, it's in the comics, it's in the lore, it was in the cartoons. I feel like I'm in a bizarro world with Roxy Stryer on this one. I think it looked cool, but I know I am in the minority. This was one that, like, this was the first really divisive thing of Comic-Con, and it was just so happened to be like the first big thing that came out of Comic-Con this year too.
Another one was the Predator panel, which we heard very mixed things about. There were a couple of people that said that they liked it, and if you like Shane Black, maybe you'll enjoy this movie. Lawrence, who is the editor-in-chief of Fandom, told me, nah,
Lawrence.
it was not good. Hey, Lawrence, he's right there, actually. Said it was a very kind of tone deaf and did not land. The jokes didn't land. The action was unimpressive. So little mixed response out of that.
Big mixture, because I've heard on the other end, people were like, they gave us a scene that really sold it as a Shane Black movie, and they gave us a scene They gave us Predator, actually, that we didn't see in the trailer. So,
TBD. No future DC announcements. Now, on the one hand, that's a little disappointing because we always want things to be able to talk about. But on the other hand, I think it was the smart move on the marketing department's part to focus on the very strong pieces of content that they brought with them. Because we're sitting here talking about it, that everything we're saying were the highlights are from Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
Godzilla, Shazam, Aquaman.
I mean, Dan and I both thought that we were going to get not only the announcement that there was a new Batman, but that he was going to walk out. I think we both predicted that would happen. Didn't happen. And I think I predicted the other day that Joaquin Phoenix and Zazie Beetz would come out on stage and maybe one more principal actor that hadn't been announced yet. Didn't even mention once the Joker thing. So, yeah, in that sense, I guess a little disappointing. But you're right. In hindsight, it's like, put your best foot forward, man.
Yeah.
You kind of got yourself into this mess by announcing a ton of stuff ahead of time that ended up not
within one of your movies.
Yeah.
I honestly think this was the future of the DC world of, what's it called now?
World of DC.
World of DC.
Like a Walt Disney thing.
I think
That's the problem with it, is that it's like world is associated with Disney.
Yeah.
Not,
The world of
and I
DC.
guess
the
also
land of DC already
the
also
globe
bad.
and Earth and where we live.
I think this was introducing the future of DC films because while sure we knew Shazam was out and we'd seen a picture or two and we've known there's an Aquaman movie coming for a long time, DC is still what, or at least for me as of this morning, was the Justice League movie and endless speculation about Joker films. And this was front and center, I think, the future of DC. This bonkers, crazy-looking underwater Lord of the Rings Aquaman movie,
Yes.
and this very, very fun Shazam movie. And I think that's the message they really wanted to deliver. This is what's coming.
Yeah.
Expect more of this.
And then Dan was telling us how distinct the Wonder Woman footage looked as compared to the first Wonder Woman film, which is very exciting. And that Patty Jenkins made a point to say, I'm not trying to do just more of the same. So what's the big takeaway I have, even given the Joker movie moving forward, is that each of these films is going to be what they need to be. And they're going to focus on making the individual films as strong as they can be and not trying to force in this united tone and universe.
Yeah.
That's the best news. Because whether each one is a hit, at least they'll all be interesting. And they'll all be
absolutely.
a story.
And they'll all feel like their own thing.
Yeah.
That's what made the road to the first Avengers so interesting, was you kind of started to go, how is this World War II movie going to fit with this weird Norse god movie, and how are they going to fit with Iron Man?
Sure.
And I'm already interested in that with these. How is Aquaman and Shazam going to fit together?
Yeah, it's funny.
I really want to see it.
When I watched the Shazam trailer, normally if because I think there's been rumor that Superman may show up in it, I'd roll my eyes like, okay. But now I'm like, actually, I kind of want to see what this character is going to do with some of the characters we already know. Like, it's finally starting to get that excitement that we've been trying to figure out for, I don't know, since maybe Man of
That
Steel.
is the mystery of Comic-Con, in that for me, the biggest loser of the con can be DC and Robin glaring at a camera and going, F you, Batman. And then DC can turn around and be the biggest winner of the convention, too. Oh, mysteries abound.
Mysteries. Oh, the mysteries.
Oh, mysteries.
Oh,
Dance group.
mysteries.
Oh, mysteries.
Oh, mysteries.
Groot.
Oh,
Wait. Melodic. Oh,
mysteries.
Other big
okay.
losers, no surprise Marvel announcements. There was a snafu that we talked about at the Venom panel, in which they had tried to get people to gag themselves and chant at the same time. Didn't work out all that well.
That.
And then
I was thinking I was talking jorts with Cena at that point.
I'll tell you the full story. But another one that's a little weird that Billy mentioned was that the DC panel featured.
Yeah. This. Well, it wasn't the DC panel. It was the Warner Brothers panel.
Pardon me.
Just
Calm down,
like yeah. Calm yourself, Crew.
Not everything is the Jackson 5.
Do you know how to turn that off? I feel like we prayed to it and we've
Yeah.
like,
No, it's
unlocked
alive
something
now.
evil in this room now. Like people have been mentioning it, and we have to assume they went to great lengths for this to not be an issue. But a little weird to have Johnny Depp on stage and then Amber Heard right after. A little bit of like an oversight by Warner Brothers. But I also have seen reactions because Johnny Depp came out in character as Grindelwald, which, you know, that's a cool moment. You know, Loki, it's
You want it to be.
before. Right. But I heard there's reports online, and Dan said he didn't hear it, but he said he was also too far in the front, but he got booed.
Yeah.
Which is not quite the reaction you want. I'm not sure.
Not
The
what
movie
they
with
were
that
looking
character's
for.
name in the title?
Yeah, it just sounds like this was a little bit of I'm glad they put that first, so that's not the lasting impression of the entire Warner
Me
Brothers
too.
panel.
I just also noticed that this can happen when we're
Or
on
he's just
your
like,
camera.
like,
So that might be a thing that I just do periodically. One of the highlights for me was we had some fun guests in here. We did some interviews with the Deadpool 2. We did some, we showed in today's show. Today is Saturday, but for you it's Monday, so figure that math out from Into the Spider-Verse. But we also talked to, boom, numbers, Vision and Mantis about Infinity War.
they have
And
real names too.
No, they don't. Vision and Mantis from Infinity War, and we asked them a couple of different things, and one was just about the snap. And you know what? Is there any good that comes from that? And then we have to. I know you guys have probably talked about this a fair bit, but I am really curious. Do you think about sort of the real-world ramifications of the snap, and if that were really to happen, do you think that's just all bad? But I do have that one neighbor.
Like you could get rid of the riffraff.
Right?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, there's a sort of slightly terrifying fascistic fantasy involved in it, right? It's the same thing with zombie movies and shows. It's kind of like, let's start it all again. There's something slightly dubious and fascistic about it.
While you were enjoying that clip, we got coffee.
I got, so wait,
No, you got coffee.
the Starbucks downstairs is a Jurassic World themed Starbucks, so I got the Indominus Frap. A delicious concoction of cookies and creams and things that I'm like.
Are these SJU sponsored? Because we got to cut this.
No.
Coming to
covering
you
it.
from.
It was Schmarshmucks is where I got it from.
Schmarshmucks.
Yeah, great coffee.
Have fun eating your birthday cake during the show.
Yeah, I know. Have fun with the sugar crash that you're gonna have.
Where else we going, Roth?
Turn him back on. Hey, we also asked them about sort of talking to Kevin Feige and the rumors that they would hear around things like living in the soul world and so forth, and if they pay attention to that. And here's what they said. Do you guys pay attention to the theories going around about sort of the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Are there any that you think are really funny or weird?
Only if they're told to me by Kevin Feige.
Does he go, okay, we're going to do 2 truths and a lie?
No, but we do play a game where if I will guess where it's going, and he'll tell me if I'm right or not.
I feel like it was getting a little unnerving to keep seeing me in the same jacket, but like dissolving in and out of time. So I've done this for you and taken it off.
I do think it's interesting though that like he asked Kevin Feige like, "Am I right?" I can't imagine Kevin Feige just being like, "Yep," and then just walking off. That seems kind of. He doesn't believe it either.
He's not buying any of that. Kevin Feige is so brilliant at telling you exactly what he wants you to write about or say or know, and telling you nothing at all at the same time. So I could imagine that he's like evasive enough with the yes and the no that he's not really telling Bettany anything that Bettany can't actually know. And Groot agrees. He's like, word, that's how Feige is.
Yeah, he didn't tell Groot anything what was going to happen.
I feel like if he was going to tell one character, he would tell Groot. The other thing that we talked about is, of course, with the impending Fox-Disney deal, everyone's going to be asking them, which X-Men do you want to play with first? And here's what they said.
I mean, I always loved, you know, Halle Berry, Storm. I would have loved to, you know, have scenes with her and Wolverine, but now he's kind of, right? He was kind of the last one, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did.
But I would have been all over Mantis and Wolverine. That would be
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, that would have been a great. That would
I
have
would
been
ship that.
And you do have someone that you would
Well, I'm a big Wolverine fan, and it was such a great demise for him. It was really moving and emotional, and I don't know how you roll that back. I mean, of course, there's ways to roll back almost anything in these worlds, but yeah, it would be interesting.
Sure, that was not planned. But Storm and Wolverine, no surprise there. Do you feel like those are the only two characters that any actor knows?
I think the obvious choice for Vision is to hook up with a Sentinel, right?
Yeah.
It's robot.
Yeah.
Robot.
Yeah, robot.
It makes sense.
Love. Yeah.
I don't. Is there an X-Men that's?
Why are
like
you keeping all the robots together?
Sorry, they can love whoever they want, but is there a full-on droid robot X-Men?
Yeah, there's a lady that was a former Sentinel, and it's been several days of madness, and I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she was a full robot. The Danger Room became a sentient person named Danger, who was a bad guy for a little bit, right, Groot? And then she was a good guy. Yeah, there's been some robots.
Okay, I love
in the
robots.
X-Men.
But you know what? We all love that Wolverine. I mean, I do think it's funny because they're trying to track everything that's going on with their franchise, but then they're like, Wolverine's dead? Question mark? Is the Wolverine still a thing that we can make happen? I like that they're not quite sure what's a possibility for them, because this is not what they're thinking about, but what they are thinking about, or what I imagine that they are, is the actual implications for their careers. In terms of what this deal means and how it will shape how the industry does its business. So, I mean, certainly having the X-Men available to the Avengers would shape their careers because they're Avengers. But I wanted to hear what they thought about that from that more pragmatic, real sense. And Paul Bettany gave a really great answer. I'm just curious, really curious, your perspective, because we talk about it so much in terms of mega studios and how that will change how films are made. And do you have a take on that?
I mean, it'll always be there in some version or another, but it feels very much like it's going to become very niche. It wasn't so many years ago where films could find audiences. Quirky little movie could find an audience. Unless you're Manchester by the Sea, that's not true anymore. And so there's one movie a year, 2 movies a year that get to have that life. And it also used to be that television had to work for everybody, right? And now that's totally flipped. We're at a time where film has to work for everybody and make a fortune, and everybody has to go to see it. And TV can find a little audience because there's so many outlets. But I imagine what ends up happening is that, you know, the sort of the sort of Netflix version of releasing movies where they're released day and date, you know, streaming and have a theatrical release is going to be much, you know, more and more often the way these films are going to get distributed.
I really liked what he had to say, and I could have talked to him for about an hour just about the industry. I said talking. I did, but we're still gonna have. We're still gonna have this damn conversation. We're gonna have a real conversation about the industry. As tired as we are, thank you, Chewie. Chewie's backing me up on this.
Guys, let's get serious.
Backing me up. Thank you, Chewie. You know, one of the things that he said that was absolutely true, and it's so obvious, is that television and movies have sort of traded places in the sense that initially with television, it was 3 channels. It had to work for everyone. It had to be like 4-quadrant friendly. Right. And now television is more and more niche, and there's sort of room for smaller shows to find their audience, and there's so many platforms available as well. But it's interesting because he had this very real, I think, concern about where cinema in total is headed. And we talk about this a lot. So I just want to get your take on that.
Yeah, it's always interesting because I feel like, and it's just inevitable with the way like our shows are, that we're kind of like the Monday morning quarterbacks, you know, like we're not working.
Oh, you know what you should have done.
Right. But I feel like it's always interesting to get the perspective of someone who's like a main player in this massive franchise. And even there, like, yeah, we feel it, we see it. Like, I'm a little bit cautious. I feel like Paul Bettany is one of those actors that probably, like a lot of the movies that I love of his were not the big Infinity Wars and stuff. So I think there is a fear of like actors like him that maybe don't get these big IP franchises that are kind of gonna have a harder time getting like these little films made. I know like Sorry to Bother You is one that's like, in 5 years, is that even going to be something that even hits a theater, or is that going to go
probably not
straight to a Hulu or a Netflix or something? And that's, that kind of sucks a little bit.
I also don't think that will necessarily be a bad thing in a couple of years, because the expectation will be people will want to look for stuff like that on streaming. Just people's perception of where quality goes is going to evolve. I think at the end of the day, no matter what's going on in the business, the cream will always continue to rise to the top, and that cream will be people on the bottom of the totem pole innovating and doing something new and doing something really exciting. You very rarely see, someone who's been a blockbuster director for ages and then they do something just crazy and out of the box for $3,000.
Right.
You see people doing things that are crazy and out of the box and really interesting that are really going to last and make an impact for those low budgets. And then the top of the pile takes a notice and they hire them to make a movie, to make a Marvel movie, to make a Star Wars movie or whatever. So I think, no matter how big of a monolith Disney gets to be, or whether Apple buys Disney and Fox and Warner Brothers, and then they are then purchased by the remaining shareholders of Showtime Pizza, like they've just been like they've just been waiting in the wings, like soon, and that's how we get to Weyland-Yutani. I think it.
I mean, it's a very Sith move to just wait out a couple millennia before you revenge.
There's just the rocket fire explosions just sitting in a garage, like yes. All that to say, no matter how big things get on that end, the innovation is still going to come from independent artists, self-finance artists. And if the sort of perception that the theater, the movie-going experience, means you've made it, means that you're validated, sort of goes the way of the dinosaur a little bit, because it will. Those places are dying on the vine. Everyone wants to look at things on their phone for whatever reason. But the innovation will still be there. That's still where the future is going to really, really come from.
I don't think movies go away. I don't think theaters go away. I think they become, and I think that we're already starting to see this in terms of people will go out to the movies for mega films, massive, big blockbusters, and they will largely want to stream smaller films, and that's just sort of the reality. And I agree, and I'm enough of a film lover that it does make me a little sad, because there are smaller films that deserve and need to be seen on the big screen that are not necessarily a blockbuster, but are beautiful in their own right. But you kind of can't fight the tide.
No.
But it was interesting to hear from him in that regard, especially being part of the biggest franchise that exists, right? Like the biggest film of this year. And he still has that thoughtful concern about where things are headed.
It was, respect for someone who's currently like being employed by Disney, giving some really sort of thoughtful introspection on the impact that this is really going to have, aside from just being like, everything's great, man. Respect. That was really, really cool.
Clark Wolf and I had the chance this morning to talk to one of my heroes, Gale Hurd, who is a legendary producer. You're going to hear me say all of the things that you will know her from, but Terminator, she co-wrote it, among many other things. And we also sort of talked to her about the changing shape of the industry in terms of how things are consumed and how that has impacted her or not as a creator. Take a look at that, and we will see you on Tuesday. Joe Starr, Billy Business, and me. Bye from Groot. Thank you from Chewie. Respect. So much respect to
Groot?
the wonderful. Stay tuned.
You okay, buddy?
Because this is an awesome interview. This is an awesome interview with a very iconic woman. God damn it. Gale Hurd. God damn it. Please watch the interview. She's so amazing. Groot! Welcome back. We are so delighted to be joined by legendary producer Gale Hurd. Gale, thank you so much for being with us today.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for asking me.
If you don't know Gale, you do know Gale. Terminator, Punisher Warzone, Armageddon, The Walking Dead, The lore. So the career is just remarkable, and I mean that in all sincerity. And I want to get your thoughts as we are in this time in the industry that's changing so rapidly. How we make media, how we consume media, where it's distributed. Do you sort of have mega studios, an overall thought on the state of this is a big question, the state of where we're at and where we may be in the next couple of years as you plan your future projects and where they're going? Because I know you're now on Amazon as well.
You know, the truth is that all of us who make content are living in the golden age of content. There are more shows than ever, there are more content creators, and we have a wider variety of options where we can pitch and where we can make our shows. I'm thinking that there will be some sort of shakedown. There might be just too much content out there. But in terms of those of us who make the content, we continue to focus on making the greatest possible shows and finding the venue that is aligned with our visions. And there are more and more of them every day. And we'll see which ones survive. But it's a great time to be a content creator.
Well, sort of on that same topic with lore, I was listening to the podcast, well before a television series or a streaming series was announced, and I was so fascinated by the way you guys chose to adapt lore, mixed media and animation and reenactments and pulling from the audio from the show. And can you talk a little bit about making those decisions to bring lore to television in that way, and maybe are you going to keep it that way for season 2, which is coming up?
Well, Aaron Menkes' lore podcast, if people haven't heard, they should definitely check it out, especially since it examines the true stories that inspire myths, folklore, and that is what inspired me. And in addition to loving horror, science fiction, and fantasy, I love true stories. And the fact that this was a marriage of the two was perfect. So we are actually, the first time I'm in the alternative division. We're making this for Amazon Alternative. And they completely embraced this idea. The thing about lore, in the first season, we very much followed the podcast. So we took a central story, which is the way that Aaron Mankey does his podcast, and then supported it with additional stories within that similar theme. And the feedback that we got was that was great, but we were disconnecting from the people in those stories. You know, the scariest thing about lore is that these stories are true, and these terrible things happen to real people. So the connection was made, and then we would disconnect as we filled out, like the podcast does, other stories. So this season, season 2, we have Sean Crouch as our showrunner, who comes to us from Exorcist, and he said, let's not break that continuity. Let's incorporate that mixed media. So let's say there's one about Burke and Hare. Now, Burke and Hare are famous, essentially mass murderers who were in Edinburgh, and there was a time when fresh bodies that were essentially initially brought by grave robbers to be dissected on stage, and students would pay people like Dr. Knox, who was the famous one, to participate and watch. He needed fresh bodies. Well, Burke and Hare decided, cut out the middleman, we'll just kill people, maybe not very nice people, and give them the freshest bodies, and they made a fortune. So in that, we used Punch and Judy. So at the time, these puppet shows, which were political commentary, and we used the Punch and Judy puppets to tell the kinds of backstory and added information that gave you the context that we had with other media in the first season.
That's cool. I'm very excited for that.
Countess Bathory is a story that I find fascinating, and I've always wondered why that was never properly done on television or on film. A little birdie told me you may be tackling Countess Bathory.
We are indeed. We are telling the Blood Countess story talk about mass murderers. I mean, she is probably the #1 female mass murderer of all time. Over 600 virgins she killed so that she could bathe in their blood because she believed that would keep her young. But because she was an aristocrat, it was very difficult to bring her to justice until she crossed that line and decided that, you know, if peasant blood is good, aristocratic blood may be better. And she actually went after an aristocrat, and that was what spelled her doom.
Another project that you have coming up is Hellfest, and I'm a big horror fan, and I noticed, like, would you classify this movie as a slasher movie?
Oh yes,
okay.
Absolutely, yes.
So you know, horror goes in cycles. Obviously, slasher movies were huge in the 1980s. They had a little bit of a resurgence after Scream, but they largely, we don't make them really, or we don't see them as frequently. So what was it about this story and this script for Hellfest that made you want to not only delve into the horror genre again, but, like, you know, focus in on a slasher story?
So the genesis of Hellfest is an idea that was developed internally by an executive, myself, and other executives at Valhalla. And since we are fanatics about horror nights and mazes and escape rooms, it really seemed like an obvious setting to have a slasher film, you know, because there are fake scares, but what if there is a real masked murderer who's out there and you can't tell the fake from the real? So to me, it fits in perfectly with the kinds of things that I love, and that's the key to what I do and why I love producing, is that I'm able to tell stories and make film and TV that I would love to see myself.
There are a lot of big changes ahead for The Walking Dead. Does this feel like a really refreshing creative opportunity for the show?
You know, if you're talking about the fact that Andy Lincoln
Sure.
is last season with us, absolutely. You know, I think the fact that he literally gave 10 years of his life to all of us on the show and to the fans, given that he put his personal life on hold, came over for most of the year to Georgia. You know, as kids are growing up, I understand it completely. But at the same time, it's an opportunity to bring people in, like we announced yesterday. Samantha Morton, who's one of the finest actors in the world, is joining the show. So there's an opportunity to do what we did with characters like, you know, like Daryl Dixon, Norman Reedus plays, but in this case, she's playing Alpha, a character from the comic books. So that we're all very, very excited about that. And the funny thing is that when that was announced on set, I mean on the stage, the rest of the cast didn't know. And if you go back and you look at that footage, you see them all light up and get incredibly excited. So even though it was an emotional time on the panel and for all of us, there's a lot of hope and excitement about the future.
You have been a woman not just working in, but owning genre for many years. And I'm curious, how did you kind of navigate those waters initially? And how have you seen that change and evolve over the years? Because I think there is still a perception, you know, Clark is a huge horror fan. I grew up as a huge horror fan. I'm a huge fan of your work. There's still sort of a perception that that's not so, I think, to some degree.
Well, I mean, there continues to be a perception that somehow women don't get horror, and that, well, the truth is, let's say we were just talking about slasher films. It's like the primary audience for slasher films are young women.
The final girl is the hero.
Exactly, and that's great, and you know, and it brings me back to Halloween, which my late friend Deborah Hill, who is one of my mentors in the business, you know, that's a model that actually empowers women, and I think people forget that, and yet horror, certainly in my career, going back to the Terminator and then Aliens, and you know, all the way up to now, it's a genre in which women can empower themselves and be role models for other people who may not think that they could survive. But going back, I was very lucky because my first job was for Roger Corman. And Roger Corman, back when I worked for him, which was in the late 70s and early 80s, always supported women. The first job I had on set was on Humanoids from the Deep, which was directed by a woman. That is remarkable. So it was actually a shock to me when I left working for Roger Corman to realize that the rest of the business was not as enlightened as he was. But he was always, and remains to this day, a mentor, even though he's in his 90s, always telling me, you know, Gale, don't listen to what they say. Don't listen to the doubters. I know. And when you hear that from someone who started the careers of, you know, Jonathan Demme and Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese, even if you doubt yourself, you listen. So we all need our Roger Cormans.
Yeah. I would like a Roger Corman.
I would
in
love
my
a
life.
Roger Corman.
I know we'll have to let you go shortly, but I'm curious. You know, I'm such a Terminator fan. I really love the Terminator. I fought for "I'll Be Back" as the greatest
Yes.
one-liner of all time on a movie fight the other night. Could you have possibly imagined the expanse of the world that was created there? How long this legacy would last? That we still have such a hunger for it. What's sort of your take on it, and where it might go, where you would like to see it go in the future?
You know, it's interesting because Jim and I were turned down, and I'm not joking, 99 times. And it goes to show that, you know, you just keep knocking on those doors. And if the project is right, it will find supporters and it will find fans. But no, I mean, from the beginning, we were told it was a down and dirty exploitation film. It would be out of theaters. This, back in the 80s, you know, everyone screened films for critics. They didn't want to screen the film for critics because they thought it was terrible. The company that released it, that made huge profits from it, you know, and so to go from that being in the Library of Congress on the National Film Registry and continues to be voted one of the seminal films of all time, no, there's simply no way to have anticipated that. And the fact that if you ask people to this day, young people who were born 20 years after the film came out, and they've all seen it. And I love when I hear that, you know, parents, when their kids turn, you know, 13, 14, watch it with them. That's great, and it tells me that the story endures. And once again, it's an empowering story about how we as people, and especially since it's a heroine, it's about Sarah Connor, can save the world. And more than ever, we need to save the world. And we can't expect someone else to do it for us. We have to own that and do what we can to make the world a better place.
Well, I can't think of a better way than
Nope.
that to wrap this up. Thank you
That's
so much for joining us today. It has been an absolute
Yes.
pleasure and an honor, and we look forward to seeing everything that you do in the future. Thank you so much
you,
for being
Gale.
with
Well,
us.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.